town of Ashfield, tucked between rolling hills of New England, had always been proud of its history. Every summer, they held parades to honor the patriots who had once marched through its cobblestone streets. Tourists came for the antique shops, the old colonial houses, and the historic town square where bronze plaques told stories of freedom, sacrifice, and courage. But just outside the square, forgotten by most, stood an old red brick schoolhouse. Its windows were cracked, its doors swollen with age, and weeds climbed the sides like nature was trying to claim it back. At its very top, leaning slightly to one side, hung a massive iron bell. Once, that bell had called generations of children to their lessons, and during the Revolution, it had been rung to warn the town of approaching soldiers. Now, it was silent. People said the bell hadn't rung in more than 100 years. Some said the clapper had been removed. Others whispered darker stories, that the bell was cursed. That one tragic night it tolled by itself and someone was found dead beneath it. Most children hurried past without looking. But Clara wasn't like most children. She was 11 years old, with a restless mind and eyes that always searched for things others ignored. Her parents worked long hours, and she often wandered the town by herself, drawn to old books, empty fields, and stories long forgotten. That October morning, with leaves crunching beneath her boots and the air crisp with the bite of autumn, Clara found herself staring at the schoolhouse again. The place looked lonely, and for reasons she couldn't explain. She felt it was waiting for her. She slipped through the broken gate and stepped into the yard. The silence there was heavier than the rest of town. Like even the birds avoided the place. She tilted her head back, gazing at the bell tower. The rope still hung down, frayed and dusty, swaying faintly in the breeze. Clara reached for it. Her fingertips brushed the coarse fibers, and a shiver shot through her arm. The rope felt alive. She wrapped her hand around it, and in that instant, she heard it, not the toll of the bell, but voices. Faint, layered, echoing as if they were carried on a wind from another century. They weren't speaking clearly, just fragments of words. Urgent, calling, pleading. Clara froze, her heart pounding. The air around her seemed to hum. And then, one voice rang sharper than the rest. A man's voice, strong and steady. Do not let them forget us. Clara staggered back, letting go of the rope. The voices stopped. The yard fell silent again, as if nothing had happened. But Clara's world had already changed. She knew, whatever this bell held, it was not finished speaking. And for the first time in over a century, someone had heard its call. Clara stood frozen in the abandoned schoolhouse, her breath caught in her throat. The air had grown heavy, as though the walls themselves were holding secrets too long untold. The faint ghostly shapes she thought she saw near the broken windows had already faded, but their presence lingered in the silence. She pressed her small hand against her chest, trying to steady her heartbeat. It was just the light, she whispered, though deep down she knew it wasn't. The bell rope swayed gently, though no wind touched it. Clara's eyes followed its slow movement until her gaze settled on a faded plaque nailed to the wall. Dust covered most of the lettering, but she could make out enough. Founded 1776. Dedicated to liberty. Something about the date gripped her. She had read about that year in school, how it marked the birth of the nation. Could it be that this place had once been a gathering ground, not just for children, but for voices of freedom itself? Suddenly, a low groan echoed from above, and Clara's head snapped upward. The heavy bell creaked on its rusted frame. Then, faint as a sigh, she heard it, a child's laughter. It wasn't cruel, nor joyful. It was sorrowful, almost pleading. Her throat tightened. She spun toward the doorway, ready to flee, but stopped when she saw something etched deep into the wood near the exit. Someone long ago had carved a name, Eleanor. The letters were shaky, carved with desperation, as if each stroke carried a story of fear or hope. Clara's fingers traced the grooves. The name felt familiar, though she couldn't explain why. The floor beneath her groaned, snapping her out of her thoughts. She darted outside into the cool air, but the feeling followed her, an invisible thread tugging at her heart. By the time she reached home, her parents were already at the dinner table. Her father looked up from his plate. "You're late." Clara forced a smile. Lost track of time. Her mother's eyes narrowed. "You were near that old schoolhouse again, weren't you?" That place is dangerous. Best you stay away. Clara lowered her gaze to her food, but her mind wasn't on dinner. Her parents' warnings only made her more certain. Something important had happened at that schoolhouse. Something that someone didn't want remembered. And she was determined to uncover it. That night, as the wind howled outside her window, Clara sat at her desk with a candle flickering. She opened her notebook and wrote a single word in careful letters. Eleanor. She didn't know who the girl was or why her name had been left behind. But Clara was sure of one thing. The past was calling. And she had no choice but to answer. The name Eleanor haunted Clara all through the night. She dreamed of shadowy hallways filled with children's voices. But when she reached out to touch them, they dissolved into smoke. When morning came, she woke with her sheets tangled around her and a strange determination burning in her chest. At school that day, Clara could hardly concentrate. While her classmates scribbled notes, her mind drifted back to the carved letters in the wood. As soon as the final bell rang, she made her way to the town library, its tall wooden doors creaking as she stepped inside. The library smelled of dust and ink, a place where history lived quietly on shelves. Clara approached the elderly librarian, Mrs. Whitmore, who peered over her glasses with a knowing smile. Looking for something special, dear? She asked. Clara hesitated, then whispered, Do you have anything about the old schoolhouse? Mrs. Whitmore's expression shifted ever so slightly. For a moment, Clara thought she saw fear in her eyes, but the librarian nodded and led her to a dimly lit corner where old newspapers and records were stacked in brittle folders. Clara flipped through them until one headline made her heart skip a beat. Tragedy at Liberty Schoolhouse, 1779. Her hands trembled as she read. The article told of a fire that broke out one stormy night. Dozens of children were trapped inside, their laughter and screams forever silenced. Only a handful had survived. And among the names of those who had perished was one. That struck her like lightning. Eleanor Gray. Clara's eyes blurred with tears. Eleanor had been real. She wasn't just a name carved in wood. She was a child whose life ended in that very building. And somehow her spirit still lingered. Closing the folder, Clara noticed Mrs. Whitmore watching her carefully. You found Eleanor, didn't you? The librarian asked softly. Clara nodded, her voice trembling. She's still there. Mrs. Whitmore's face grew pale. She leaned closer and lowered her voice. If Eleanor is reaching out to you, child, it's because she wants something. Spirits don't linger without reason. But be careful. The past doesn't let go easily. As Clara left the library, the weight of Eleanor's story pressed heavily on her shoulders. She walked through the streets of her small town, noticing things she hadn't before, the way older folks avoided speaking of the schoolhouse, the way children crossed the road to stay clear of it. By the time Clara reached her own doorstep, one truth had already taken root in her heart. Eleanor's story had been buried, forgotten by everyone but her. And if the world had chosen to forget, Clara would be the one to remember. She whispered into the evening air, Eleanor, I won't leave you alone. Not again. And in the distance, faint but unmistakable, she thought she heard that same sorrowful laugh, carried on the wind like a promise. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. The memory of Eleanor's name and the faded newspaper headline looped endlessly in her mind. She sat by her window, staring out at the dark streets of the town, listening for that faint laugh she thought she'd heard earlier. But the night gave her only silence. By morning, she had made up her mind. If Eleanor's spirit remained trapped, Clara had to know why. And she couldn't wait any longer. She packed a small bag with a flashlight, a notebook, and a bottle of water, then made her way toward the abandoned schoolhouse. The sun was sinking low, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple when she arrived. The building looked even more haunting in the fading light. Its windows were dark, and the broken shutters swung gently in the breeze. Clara gripped her flashlight tightly and stepped inside. Dust swirled around her as her footsteps echoed against the old wooden floors. The air was heavy, carrying the faint smell of smoke, as though the fire that had claimed the children all those years ago still lingered. Clara whispered into the empty hall, Eleanor, it's me again. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, faintly, a desk at the far end of the room scraped across the floor. though no one had touched it. Clara's heart raced, but she forced herself to move closer. When she reached the desk, her flashlight revealed something she hadn't noticed before, a faint drawing carved into the wood, alongside Eleanor's name. It looked like a flower, delicate and simple, as though a child had etched it during a long school day. Clara ran her fingers over it and felt a sudden wave of sorrow wash through her chest. A whisper followed, soft and broken, almost like a child calling for help. Clara froze. "Why are you still here?" she asked the darkness. The whisper grew louder, forming words she could barely understand. Forgotten. Left behind. Clara's chest tightened. She remembered what Mrs. Whitmore had said. Spirits didn't linger without reason. Eleanor wasn't simply haunting the schoolhouse. She was waiting. Waiting for someone to remember her, to free her story from silence. "I know what happened to you," Clara whispered. "I read about the fire. But I won't let your memory fade." The air shifted. The boards creaked. And the temperature dropped so suddenly that Clara could see her breath in the beam of her flashlight. Somewhere deep in the building, another laugh, this time sharper, closer, echoed through the halls. But this laugh wasn't sorrowful. It was angry. Clara realized with a jolt that Eleanor wasn't the only one left behind in the fire. Clara stood frozen in the dark schoolhouse, her flashlight trembling in her hand. That laugh, low and bitter, did not sound like Eleanor at all. It carried a weight, something older and crueler, as if the walls themselves had remembered the night of the fire. She backed up slowly, her boots creaking against the warped floorboards. "Eleanor," she whispered, her voice shaking, "is that you?" No answer. Only silence stretching heavy around her. Then, without warning, the doors to the classroom slammed shut one by one, each crash echoing through the building like thunder. Dust fell from the ceiling. Clara's heart pounded so loud she thought it might drown out everything else. Her flashlight flickered. For one split second, in its weak beam, she saw them. Children. Dozens of them. Sitting quietly at their desks. Their faces pale, their eyes hollow. Their small hands folded on the desks in front of them. And at the very back, standing taller, was a shadowed figure. Not a child. Clara gasped, stumbling back. She blinked, and the vision was gone. The desks were empty again. Her voice cracked as she spoke into the emptiness. "I came to help. Please, show me what you need." Then came the sound of footsteps, tiny ones, padding across the floor. Clara swung the flashlight toward the noise and found herself staring at a single piece of chalk, rolling across the blackboard. It stopped and lifted, moving as if guided by an unseen hand. Slowly, shakily, it spelled out one word. Trapped. Clara's knees weakened. She whispered, "You. All of you are still here." The chalk dropped, clattering to the ground. A child's laugh rang out again, this time mixed with the sound of crying. Clara covered her mouth, realizing what she had stumbled into. The fire hadn't only taken Eleanor, it had claimed every child in the school. And something, or someone, was holding them here, bound to this place. A sudden chill swept through the room, so cold it burned. Her flashlight went out completely, plunging her into darkness. And in that black silence, she heard a voice, not Eleanor's, not a child's, but deep and heavy. "You should not have come." Clara's stomach dropped. She wasn't just uncovering memories of tragedy, she had awakened something that wanted the children to remain forgotten. Clara's breath caught in her throat. The air pressed heavy against her chest, as though invisible hands were squeezing the life out of the room. She reached into her bag, fumbling for the spare flashlight, her fingers shaking. When the beam finally cut through the darkness, it revealed something she wasn't prepared for. The walls were blackened with soot, shifting as if they were alive. Faces seemed to push outward from the charred wood, their mouths open in silent screams, fading before she could focus on them. Clara forced herself to keep the light steady, her voice breaking but determined. "Eleanor, children, if you can hear me, I will not leave you here." Her words seemed to anger the presence. A low rumble echoed through the schoolhouse, and the ground trembled beneath her feet. The desk scraped violently across the floor, dragging into a circle around her. The sound was deafening. Clara spun in place, trapped inside a cage of old wooden desks. From the corner of the room, a figure stepped forward. Not a shadow this time, something more solid, cloaked in smoke and flame, its form towering and twisted. Its eyes glowed like embers, and its voice rumbled through the hollow building. "They are mine." Clara's heart thundered. She could barely breathe, yet she stood her ground. Her grandmother's words echoed in her memory. "Light will always fight the dark if you carry it inside you." She clutched the pendant around her neck, a small family heirloom, and whispered a prayer. For the first time, the air shifted. The whispers of children grew louder. No longer cries of fear but soft pleas for release. Clara realized they wanted her to fight, not run. She raised the flashlight, shining it straight into the figure's burning eyes. The light shook in her trembling hand but didn't falter. The spirit roared, the sound shaking the building. The windows shattered, glass exploding into the night. Clara held her ground, even as the circle of desks lifted from the ground, hovering as if suspended by invisible threads. The chalkboard behind the spirit lit up again, words scrawling furiously across it without touch. "Free US." Clara's tears blurred her vision. She shouted into the chaos, her voice raw. "I will not stop until you are free." The shadow lunged, the room collapsing into screams and firelight. And then, silence. The silence was so complete that Clara thought she had gone deaf. Dust floated in the broken light filtering through the shattered windows. And for a moment, she feared the spirit had won. Then, she heard it. A faint humming. The sound of a lullaby. It was soft, fragile, almost hidden beneath the echoes of ruin, but unmistakably real. The voices of children joined it, weaving into the tune until it filled the schoolhouse with aching beauty. Clara dropped to her knees, gripping the pendant in her hand. Her tears fell freely now, not from fear, but from knowing she had touched them, that they were reaching back. The twisted figure appeared once more, writhing as though the melody was burning it alive. Its form shattered, pieces breaking away like smoke torn by the wind. With one final scream, it dissolved into nothing, leaving only the faint warmth of light drifting upward into the night. The desks clattered back to the floor. The air grew lighter, as if the building itself could finally breathe again. And then, the chalkboard wrote its last words. "Thank you. We are free." Clara sobbed, her whole body shaking. She stood, looking out at the empty room that no longer felt haunted. For the first time in decades, it felt like peace had returned. As she stepped outside into the cool night, she looked back at the old schoolhouse one last time. The windows glowed faintly, not with fire, but with a soft golden light, like children holding lanterns in the dark. And then it faded, leaving only the quiet prairie under the stars. Clara whispered into the night, "Rest now. You're safe." Her story didn't end there. She would tell it, share it, keep it alive, so no one would forget what had happened in that forgotten schoolhouse. And now, as you've walked with Clara through this haunting journey, ask yourself, would you have been brave enough to face the shadows and set them free? If you want to hear more stories that reach into the past, uncover forgotten truths, and leave you with chills, then don't leave just yet. Subscribe, because the next story might be even darker, and you won't want to miss it. This final part closes the arc with emotion and meaning, and the subscribe appeal is woven naturally into the ending.